The fall. Marjorie stood at the restaurant entrance, a warm smile lighting her face as she greeted the evening's guests. The bustling dining hall of the Grand Regency Hotel shimmered under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and Marjorie loved the energy each new evening brought. Tonight was special. A food critic was rumored to visit, and Marjorie was more determined than ever to make everything perfect. She glided from table to table, ensuring every guest was comfortable, every wine glass was filled, and every request met with a smile. Despite her position as a waitress, Marjorie had dreams that extended far beyond serving tables. Her mind often wandered to the aromas of her family kitchen, where she'd learned the delicate art of blending flavors. Tonight, though, she was focused solely on impressing not only the critic, but also the kitchen staff, who often dismissed her aspirations. She'd worked tirelessly for 5 years, hoping her dedication would eventually earn her a spot in the kitchen. But as she glanced toward the busy chefs, her thoughts were shattered by the voice of Lucilia, the head chef and new owner of the hotel restaurant. Lucilia was notorious for her demanding standards and dismissive attitude, and her sharp voice pierced through the dining room. "Marjorie, I need that table set now. And stop hovering around the kitchen. I told you, this is not your place." Marjorie's cheeks flushed as her gaze dropped. She straightened her uniform, taking a deep breath before returning to the dining room. She fought to keep her composure, focusing on her tasks and trying to brush off the sting of Lucilia's words. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and her confidence felt chipped. The evening progressed, and Marjorie moved swiftly, handling each task with grace. But as she delivered the last appetizers, she noticed Lucilia's gaze lingering, her mouth a thin line of irritation. Then, with an unexpected coldness, Lucilia pulled Marjorie aside in the dim hallway beside the kitchen. "We need to talk." Lucilia's tone was curt, her expression unreadable. Marjorie's heart sank as she followed, apprehension clouding her thoughts. Inside the cramped manager's office, Lucilia's icy stare met Marjorie's. "I've had enough of your so-called helpful attitude, always trying to stick your nose where it doesn't belong," Lucilia said, her voice barely above a whisper yet laced with venom. "You may have your little dreams of being in the kitchen, but this restaurant doesn't need a waitress meddling in affairs she doesn't understand." Marjorie's eyes widened in shock, and her voice caught in her throat. She felt like a deer caught in the headlights, her pulse racing. "Chef Lucilia, I just want to help. I've been working hard for years, and I thought—" Lucilia held up a hand, cutting her off. "No, you're done here, effective immediately. I can't have you distracting my staff. You're fired." Those words hit Marjorie like a punch to the gut. Her world spun, and she struggled to breathe. "Fired," she repeated, barely able to believe it. The 5 years she'd given to this place, the late nights, the sacrifices, vanished with a few cruel words. "Yes, and you're leaving now." Lucilia's voice left no room for argument. Marjorie felt numbed as she staggered back into the staff room, her hands shaking as she removed her apron. She looked around at her coworkers, but they all avoided her gaze, too intimidated by Lucilia to offer a word of support. As Marjorie gathered her things, she felt the weight of despair pressing down on her. With her final glance around, she caught the sympathetic looks of a few familiar faces, but none of them dared to speak up. Holding her head high despite the ache in her chest, she walked through the kitchen one last time, out into the restaurant she had once felt was her second home. Stepping out into the cold night air, Marjorie took a shaky breath, struggling to keep her tears at bay. The world seemed harsher, colder. The dreams she had nurtured so carefully felt like distant fragments now. She walked down the dimly lit street, her mind racing with doubts and fears. Back at her tiny apartment, Marjorie dropped her bag on the floor and sank to her knees. She let the tears fall freely, the pain of betrayal and loss washing over her. She clutched a framed photo of her first day at the hotel, her younger self smiling with unbridled hope. How naive she had been, thinking hard work alone would bring her success. "Why?" she whispered into the silence, her voice breaking. She felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The future that had once seemed so bright now loomed dark and unknown. But as dawn broke, Marjorie found herself lying awake, her gaze fixed on the faint light filtering through her window. Slowly, the darkness began to dissipate, replaced by a faint glimmer of determination. Lucilia's scornful words echoed in her mind, but they no longer cut as deeply. Instead, they fueled a new fire, a deep resolve growing within her. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. She still had her love for cooking, her knowledge of flavors, and the resilience that had carried her this far. And while the path ahead was uncertain, Marjorie realized something crucial. She had been knocked down, but she wasn't defeated. As she took a deep breath, she made herself a promise. She would rise again, but this time on her terms. This was just the beginning. The spark. For the first few days after losing her job, Marjorie felt like she was floating in a haze. The daily rhythm she'd known for years was gone, replaced by an emptiness that echoed through her small apartment. She woke up late, listlessly stared at her barren walls, and watched as the hours melted into each other. Each time she closed her eyes, she replayed Lucilia's cold words, the harsh dismissal, and the humiliation of leaving the place she had dedicated years of her life to. But Marjorie wasn't someone who could wallow for long. The fire within her, dimmed but not extinguished, began to flicker back to life. By the end of the week, she was out of bed and brainstorming her next steps. Bills were piling up, and her savings weren't going to last forever. If she was going to move forward, she needed a plan, and fast. Determined to make a fresh start, Marjorie began searching for new jobs. She filled out applications, attended interviews, and even considered returning to waitressing, though the thought left her feeling hollow. As she walked through the bustling streets, observing the restaurants and cafes that lined the avenue, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant for more. One afternoon, as she strolled past a bustling cafe, she caught sight of a familiar face, Mrs. Ellis, a regular from the Grand Regency Hotel. The elderly woman sat at a small outdoor table, a warm smile lighting up her face as she recognized Marjorie. "Marjorie, dear, how wonderful to see you," Mrs. Ellis called, waving her over. Marjorie felt a pang of embarrassment as she approached. She wasn't sure if Mrs. Ellis had heard about her firing, and part of her didn't want to admit what had happened. "Oh, Mrs. Ellis, it's lovely to see you too," Marjorie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Ellis tilted her head, her eyes full of kindness. "I heard about what happened at the hotel. Absolutely dreadful. They never appreciated you the way they should have." Marjorie's face flushed, and she lowered her gaze. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. It's been difficult." Mrs. Ellis placed a comforting hand on Marjorie's. "You don't need them, dear. You have such talent, such passion for food. You were always meant for something greater than that place." Marjorie managed a small smile. "I'm trying to figure out what's next. I thought about applying to a few other restaurants, maybe find something as a waitress again." "Nonsense," Mrs. Ellis interrupted, her tone firm. "You have a gift, Marjorie. I remember you telling me about those recipes you've been working on, blending flavors from your heritage with a modern twist. Why not pursue that?" Marjorie shook her head, laughing softly. "It sounds like a dream, but I wouldn't even know where to start." Mrs. Ellis's eyes twinkled. "Well, perhaps I can help. There's an exclusive culinary competition in a few months. It's where aspiring chefs showcase their skills, and the winner gets funding and mentorship. I have a few connections. If you're interested, I'd be happy to sponsor you." The words hung in the air, Marjorie's heart racing with disbelief. A culinary competition. The thought thrilled and terrified her. "Mrs. Ellis, I don't know what to say. I've never even worked as a chef." "Nonsense," Mrs. Ellis repeated. "You have the skill, Marjorie. All you need is confidence. I've seen the way your face lights up when you talk about food. Don't let doubt hold you back." Marjorie's mind whirled. The idea seemed ridiculous, yet that tiny flicker of hope glowed brighter with every second. "Okay, she said finally, her voice trembling with excitement and nerves. "I'll do it." Mrs. Ellis's face broke into a wide smile. "Wonderful. You have a few months to prepare, and I'll cover the entry fees and ingredients. Consider it an investment in someone I believe in." As they said their goodbyes, Marjorie felt a surge of determination course through her. For the first time since losing her job, she had a purpose, a goal worth fighting for. She returned to her apartment that evening, her heart light, and her mind racing with possibilities. Over the next few weeks, Marjorie threw herself into preparation. She transformed her tiny kitchen into a culinary lab, experimenting with flavors and combinations she'd only dreamed of before. She studied the cuisines of her heritage and mixed them with new techniques, her creations reflecting her own journey, a blend of cultures, resilience, and ambition. At first, Marjorie's dishes were rough, her sauces too bold, her flavors clashing. But slowly, with each mistake, she refined her techniques. Her confidence grew, and her dishes began to take on a life of their own. Her kitchen was filled with the vibrant aromas of spices, herbs, and marinades, and the walls bore witness to her triumphs and her failures. Every few days, Mrs. Ellis would stop by, offering feedback and encouragement. She tasted each dish with a discerning palate, her praises and gentle critiques guiding Marjorie's journey. Together, they laughed, experimented, and celebrated each small success. One evening, as Marjorie prepared a new fusion dish inspired by her grandmother's recipes, a memory flooded her mind. She recalled the hours she'd spent in her grandmother's kitchen, the warmth of the oven and the scent of herbs lingering in the air. Her grandmother's hands, weathered yet graceful, would guide her, teaching her to mix, taste, and savor every ingredient. "I'll make you proud, Grandma," Marjorie whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek as she stirred the pot. She poured her love, her memories, and her heritage into every dish, creating a culinary story that felt deeply personal and profoundly powerful. As the months passed, Marjorie became more than just a chef in training. She was an artist, her food a canvas on which she painted flavors, emotions, and memories. Her dishes told a story of struggle, of ambition, of the journey from despair to hope. She crafted everything from tamale-inspired pot pies to zesty tacos with traditional spices, each bite a blend of nostalgia and innovation. One late night, after a particularly successful dish, Marjorie sank onto her couch, exhausted but exhilarated. The thought of the competition still intimidated her, but a new strength had taken root. She realized that she didn't need Lucilia's validation or anyone else's approval. This was her journey, and she was finally in control of her own destiny. When the day of the competition finally arrived, Marjorie stood at the entry, her heart pounding with both excitement and fear. The room buzzed with energy as contestants set up their stations, each one brimming with confidence. She spotted chefs with their polished knives, professional aprons, and impeccable presentations. For a moment, doubt crept in, and she felt like a fish out of water. But then she took a deep breath, reminding herself of everything she'd overcome. She wasn't here to prove herself to anyone but herself. Marjorie walked to her station, her hand steady, her mind focused. This was her moment to share her story, to pour her heart onto the plate. As she began to cook, she could feel the weight of her past lifting, each ingredient a reminder of her journey. She moved with grace and purpose, her hands working with a rhythm she hadn't known she possessed. Her dishes were vibrant, a celebration of her roots and her resilience. When the judges finally tasted her creations, she held her breath, watching their expressions shift from curiosity to delight. One judge closed his eyes, savoring the flavors, and she could feel the pride swelling within her. She had poured her heart and soul into these dishes, and they understood. As the scores were announced, Marjorie's heart raced. She didn't know if she would win, but at that moment, it didn't matter. She had already achieved something far greater than a trophy. She had rediscovered her passion, her voice, and her courage. A taste of the past. Marjorie's heart pounded as she walked through the expansive hall of the competition. The aroma of rich spices, searing meats, and fresh herbs filled the air, a vibrant tapestry of flavors and cultures colliding in this grand culinary showcase. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the sight of chefs she had only read about, mentors she had only dreamed of meeting, and aspiring cooks like herself. Just as she set down her tools, unpacking her carefully chosen ingredients, a voice pierced the background hum. A voice she had thought she'd never hear again in such a setting. "Marjorie," came a sharp, unmistakable tone. Marjorie's heart sank, her hands freezing mid-motion. She turned slowly, her gaze falling upon a figure standing only a few stations away. Lucilia, her former boss from the Grand Regency, stood with her arms crossed, her expression hard and critical as ever. Dressed in a crisp chef's jacket with her name embroidered elegantly across the chest, Lucilia looked every bit the part of the esteemed chef she had always claimed to be. For a brief moment, Marjorie felt a surge of panic. Memories of that terrible night, of being humiliated and fired, came rushing back. Her hands shook slightly as her mind whirled. How was it possible that out of all the culinary events, they had both ended up here? But Marjorie steadied herself, taking a deep breath. She was here for herself, to showcase her passion, her vision, and her skills. This was not the time to let past wounds distract her. As the competition officially began, Marjorie focused on her dishes. She poured her energy into crafting her first appetizer. Crispy cornbread croquettes with a spicy chipotle aioli, a blend of her southern roots and Latin flavors, a bold bite that spoke of her journey and resilience. She moved swiftly and efficiently, letting her hands and instincts guide her. The aromas of smoked paprika, roasted garlic, and fresh herbs swirled around her station, grounding her and keeping her focus sharp. Despite her resolve, she could feel Lucilia's presence like a shadow. Whenever she glanced up, Lucilia was there, her eyes narrowed as she prepared her own dish. Marjorie could sense the competition had taken on a personal edge. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about proving herself, about showing Lucilia that she was more than just a waitress. She was a chef, a creator, and this was her chance to prove it to the world. The first round of judging came quickly. Marjorie presented her appetizer with a steady hand, meeting the judges' gaze as they took their first bites. Their eyes lit up, and one judge nodded in approval, murmuring something about the unique fusion of bold, comforting flavors. But Lucilia was watching, and Marjorie could feel the tension in her stare. After the first round, the competition hall buzzed with activity as contestants prepped for the next challenge. Marjorie took a moment to stretch, her mind racing with ideas. She glanced around, trying to gauge the reactions of her fellow chefs and the judges. It was then that Lucilia approached her, her movements precise, her expression unreadable. "Well, you've certainly learned a thing or two about presentation," Lucilia said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Though I must say, it's surprising to see you here. Didn't expect to find you competing at this level." Marjorie met her gaze steadily, refusing to let Lucilia's words chip away at her confidence. "There's a lot you didn't see in me, chef," she replied evenly. "But I'm here because I belong here, just like you." Lucilia's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. For a moment, Marjorie thought she saw something flicker in Lucilia's gaze, a mix of surprise and maybe even respect. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual coldness. "We'll see about that," Lucilia replied before turning sharply on her heel and walking away. Marjorie exhaled, the tension leaving her body as she refocused on the task at hand. This wasn't about Lucilia. This was about her dream, her passion, her story. As the competition progressed, the challenges became more demanding, each round pushing the chefs to their limits. Marjorie thrived on the adrenaline, creating dishes that fused her southern heritage with global influences. She prepared smoky tamales with a Korean-style dipping sauce, inspired by late-night cooking experiments in her tiny kitchen. She plated rich coconut curry shrimp alongside buttery garlic biscuits, a tribute to her family's love of bold flavors and comfort food. Each dish was a piece of her heart, a chapter of her journey from despair to hope. Despite her best efforts to ignore Lucilia, Marjorie couldn't help but notice the shift in her former boss's demeanor. Lucilia's once impeccable composure seemed to falter with each round. Her movements became rushed, her usually flawless techniques marred by tiny mistakes. Marjorie knew that Lucilia prided herself on her traditional French dishes, but the competition's emphasis on fusion and innovation seemed to challenge her rigid approach. The second-to-last round approached, and the judges introduced a unique challenge. Create a dish that represents the most important lesson you've learned in life, the head judge announced, her voice echoing through the hall. Marjorie's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly what she wanted to make, but the emotional weight of the challenge was heavier than she had expected. She glanced down at her ingredients, feeling a pang of nostalgia. She chose chicken thighs, cornmeal, and an assortment of spices that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. As she worked, memories flooded her mind. She remembered her grandmother's comforting voice, the way she would tell stories as they cooked together, passing down recipes and wisdom with each stir of the pot. Her grandmother had taught her that food was more than sustenance. It was a way to connect with others, to share love, joy, and culture. Marjorie poured these memories into her dish, creating a hearty, comforting meal, Southern-style chicken and waffles with a twist. She marinated the chicken in a blend of spices, adding just a hint of heat to remind herself of her journey through hardship. The waffles were laced with herbs and a hint of citrus, representing the brightness she'd found in herself, even in the darkest moments. As a finishing touch, she drizzled the dish with a bourbon-infused honey glaze, her way of honoring both her past and her dreams. When it was time to present, Marjorie stood before the judges with her head held high. She described her dish, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "This dish is a tribute to the most important lesson I've learned," she said. "It's about resilience, about finding strength in our roots, and about the power of food to heal and inspire. This is a piece of my journey, a reminder that even in difficult times, we can create something beautiful." The judges tasted her creation, their faces lighting up with delight. One judge even closed his eyes, savoring each bite, and Marjorie felt a swell of pride that brought tears to her eyes. As she stepped away, she caught sight of Lucilia's face. Her former boss's expression was one of mixed surprise and something that looked almost like regret. For the first time, Lucilia seemed to truly see Marjorie, not just as a former waitress, but as a chef with a story, a vision, and a strength that couldn't be denied. Lucilia's dish that round, though flawlessly executed, didn't evoke the same response from the judges. Her traditional French entree, while technically impressive, lacked the personal connection and emotional resonance that Marjorie's dish carried. The judges gave her polite nods but quickly moved on, leaving Lucilia visibly shaken. As the final round approached, the tension between Marjorie and Lucilia reached a boiling point. They hadn't exchanged words since their earlier confrontation, but the atmosphere between them was thick with unspoken emotions. Marjorie could sense Lucilia's frustration, her pride bruised by the realization that her former employee was outshining her. The final challenge was announced. Each chef would have 4 hours to create a 3-course meal representing their culinary journey. Marjorie's mind raced with ideas, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. This was her chance to tell her story, to show the world who she was and how far she had come. She started with her appetizer, a tamal-inspired tart filled with smoky corn, black beans, and a creamy avocado aioli. For the main course, she created a Southern-style gumbo with a fusion twist, incorporating spices from her heritage and garnishing it with a bright, zesty salsa. Her dessert was a delicate bread pudding, infused with coconut milk and a touch of rum, a nod to both her past and the new horizons she was forging. As she worked, Marjorie felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't just cooking, she was crafting the story, a narrative of resilience, dreams, and self-discovery. Across the room, she noticed Lucilia struggling with her final dishes, her usual confidence wavering. When the final judging began, Marjorie watched as the judges tasted each course with thoughtful expressions, their faces softening with each bite. The head judge took an extra moment to savor the last spoonful of her dessert, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. Finally, it was time for the announcement. The head judge stepped forward, clearing her throat as the contestants held their breath. The winner of this competition, someone who showed not only skill, but also heart and originality, is Marjorie. The room erupted in applause, and Marjorie's heart swelled with a mixture of joy, disbelief, and pride. She had done it. She had not only proven herself, but had also transcended the pain of her past, transforming it into something beautiful and inspiring. As she looked out over the cheering crowd, her gaze met Lucilia's. Her former boss's face was a mixture of shock, disappointment, and something else, respect, perhaps, or even remorse. Lucilia nodded slowly, acknowledging Marjorie's achievement in a silent gesture of respect. At that moment, Marjorie realized that she no longer needed Lucilia's approval. She had found her strength within herself, and her journey had only just begun. Rising to the challenge. Winning the competition had felt surreal, like a dream Marjorie had only dared to imagine. As she stood on stage, clutching her trophy, she felt the weight of her journey, the highs and lows, and every step that had brought her to this moment. The applause of the audience faded into a blur as she savored the quiet thrill of accomplishment. She had done it. She had reclaimed her voice, her passion, and most importantly, her sense of self-worth. But as the glow of victory faded, a new reality set in. Marjorie's prize included not just the trophy and the honor, but also a modest investment to start her own restaurant. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to build something truly her own, something that reflected her story, her roots, and her dreams. Yet the excitement was mixed with a fair share of fear. She had only ever been a waitress, then a hopeful contestant. Now she had to become a business owner, a chef with her own kitchen, her own menu, and her own vision. For the first few weeks, Marjorie's days were consumed with planning. She pored over potential locations, consulting with real estate agents, running through budgets, and brainstorming concepts for her restaurant. She wanted it to be more than just a place to eat. She wanted it to be an experience, a celebration of diverse flavors and cultures coming together. She envisioned a warm, welcoming space where people could gather, share stories, and connect over the love of food. She decided to call her restaurant Fusion Heart, a name that resonated deeply with her journey. The concept of fusion was about more than blending ingredients. It was about blending stories, histories, and traditions. Fusion Heart would be a place where Southern comfort food met Latin and Asian influences, a testament to the flavors and memories that had shaped her culinary identity. Marjorie's friends and supporters rallied around her, offering advice, connections, and words of encouragement. Mrs. Ellis, ever the enthusiastic cheerleader, helped her connect with local suppliers and spread the word among her network. Her support was invaluable, but Marjorie quickly realized that starting a restaurant would be no easy feat. Securing a location was just the beginning. She had to handle permits, deal with contractors, and make countless decisions about every detail, from the kitchen layout to the color of the walls. It was overwhelming, and there were days when Marjorie wondered if she had taken on too much. She spent long nights drafting menus, crunching numbers, and second-guessing herself, her confidence wavering with each new challenge. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Marjorie sat alone in the empty shell of what would soon become Fusion Heart. The walls were bare, the floors dusty, and the kitchen equipment hadn't even been installed yet. Exhausted, she leaned against the counter, the doubts that had been gnawing at her for weeks suddenly feeling insurmountable. What if this was a mistake? She whispered, her voice echoing in the empty space. She thought back to her days at the Grand Regency, when all she'd had to worry about was taking orders and making guests feel welcome. This new role as a restaurant owner felt daunting, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. But as she closed her eyes, she remembered the fire that had fueled her journey this far. She remembered the competition, the way the judges had praised her dishes, the sense of fulfillment that had come from creating something uniquely hers. This was her dream, her chance to make something lasting, and she couldn't let fear hold her back. The next morning, Marjorie arrived at the site with renewed determination. She threw herself into the work, overseeing construction, working with designers, and building a team that shared her vision. She hired a young, eager sous chef named Sam, whose creativity and energy reminded her of her own. Together, they tested recipes, balancing flavors, and textures to craft a menu that would showcase the fusion concept at the heart of her restaurant. With each passing week, Fusion Heart began to take shape. The walls were painted a warm, inviting shade, adorned with artwork that celebrated diverse cultures. The dining area was cozy yet vibrant, with long tables that encouraged people to share and connect. The kitchen, Marjorie's favorite part, gleamed with brand new equipment, each tool and station ready to bring her creations to life. Finally, after months of hard work, the grand opening was set. The buzz around Fusion Heart had been building steadily, and Marjorie could feel the excitement in the air. Friends, family, and even a few local food critics were planning to attend, eager to see what this new restaurant had to offer. On the eve of the opening, Marjorie found herself standing in the kitchen, her nerves running wild. She took a deep breath, centering herself. "This is it," she whispered, a mixture of excitement and anxiety swirling within her. The night of the grand opening arrived, and as the first guests began to trickle in, Marjorie's heart swelled with pride. She moved through the restaurant, greeting patrons with a warm smile, explaining the story behind each dish, and soaking in the laughter and conversation that filled the space. Her staff worked seamlessly, plates flying out of the kitchen, each dish crafted with love and care. The first reviews were overwhelmingly positive, praising the innovative menu, the welcoming atmosphere, and the passion that infused every detail. Marjorie felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Fusion Heart was more than a restaurant. It was a dream realized, a space where her story could be shared with others. As the evening progressed, Marjorie noticed a familiar figure lingering by the entrance. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. It was Lucilia, her former boss. Dressed in a sleek black coat, Lucilia looked around the bustling restaurant with a thoughtful expression, her gaze eventually landing on Marjorie. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Marjorie felt a wave of old emotions: hurt, resentment, and, unexpectedly, a twinge of sympathy. Lucilia approached her, and Marjorie forced herself to remain calm, her smile unwavering. "Lucilia," Marjorie greeted, her tone polite yet guarded. "Welcome to Fusion Heart. I hope you're enjoying the evening." Lucilia's eyes softened, and she nodded, glancing around the room. "This place, it's incredible. You've done something truly remarkable here, Marjorie." Marjorie blinked, surprised by the sincerity in Lucilia's voice. "Thank you," she replied, her voice cautious. Lucilia hesitated, glancing down before looking back at Marjorie. "I owe you an apology," she said, her tone subdued. "I was wrong about a lot of things. I let my own insecurities cloud my judgment, and I took it out on you. I see now what a mistake that was." Marjorie's breath caught, a mixture of emotions bubbling within her. She had dreamed of this moment, of receiving the acknowledgement she had once so desperately craved. But standing here, in her own restaurant, surrounded by people who believed in her, Marjorie realized that she no longer needed Lucilia's validation. She had found her own strength, her own path, and her own success. "Thank you, Lucilia," Marjorie said finally, her voice calm and genuine. "I appreciate your words. It wasn't easy, what happened back then, but it taught me a lot. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that experience." Lucilia nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Well, I'm glad to see you've made something truly special here. I'm proud of you, Marjorie." Marjorie offered her a small smile, the lingering resentment melting away. "Thank you. That means a lot." They stood in silence for a moment before Lucilia excused herself, disappearing into the crowd. As Marjorie watched her leave, she felt a sense of closure settle within her. This chapter of her life, marked by pain and betrayal, had finally come full circle. As the night drew to a close, Marjorie gathered her team, her heart brimming with gratitude. "Thank you all for making tonight a success," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "This place is a dream come true, and I couldn't have done it without each and every one of you." The team cheered, their faces alight with pride and excitement. Marjorie looked around at the bustling restaurant, the vibrant energy that filled the air, and felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come so far, from a waitress at the Grand Regency to the proud owner of her own restaurant, her own dream. Her journey had been one of hardship and resilience, but she had emerged stronger, more determined, and more compassionate. As she turned out the lights that night, Marjorie knew that Fusion Heart was just the beginning. This was her space, her story, and she was ready to fill it with the flavors of her past, the dreams of her future, and the love that had brought her here. Forging connections. In the weeks following Fusion Heart's grand opening, Marjorie's life transformed. Days and nights blurred as she dedicated herself to building and refining her restaurant, but each challenge she faced only strengthened her resolve. Running a restaurant proved to be as demanding as it was rewarding, with each day bringing new hurdles that tested her patience, stamina, and creativity. From managing her team to balancing costs and handling unexpected setbacks, Marjorie was discovering the realities of being an owner and a chef. One chilly morning, Marjorie arrived at Fusion Heart just as the dawn was breaking. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on the lights and inhaling deeply as the familiar scent of spices and herbs filled the air. This place, once just a dream, had become her life, and the thought of it warmed her. She walked into the kitchen and began her routine, organizing ingredients, reviewing the reservations for the day, and planning the specials. As she prepped, her sous chef Sam arrived, greeting her with a tired smile. Despite the early hour, his enthusiasm was evident. "Morning, chef. Got another big day ahead of us." Marjorie returned his smile, grateful for his dedication. Sam had been her rock during the restaurant's opening, his energy and creativity an invaluable asset. Together, they had formed a rhythm, a shared language of movement and intuition that brought life to Fusion Heart's kitchen. "Morning, Sam," she replied. "I've got an idea for a new special. Something hearty and warm for this weather. A roasted squash soup with a hint of chipotle and a corn salsa garnish. What do you think?" Sam's eyes lit up. "Sounds incredible. You really know how to play with flavors, chef." As they set to work, Marjorie felt a familiar sense of purpose. She had come a long way, but her passion for food remained the same. She was constantly exploring new ways to bring together the flavors of her heritage and life experiences, creating dishes that told her story and resonated with her guests. By noon, the restaurant was alive with energy. Guests filled the tables, each person drawn to Fusion Heart for its unique, soul-warming cuisine. Marjorie moved between the kitchen and the dining area, checking on guests, chatting with regulars, and observing her staff. She took pride in watching her team work together, each member bringing their own strengths to the table. One of the regulars, a middle-aged woman named Clara, waved Marjorie over as she passed by. "Marjorie, I have to say, every time I come here, I feel like I'm transported somewhere else. Your food brings back memories I didn't even know I had." Marjorie's heart swelled at the compliment. "Thank you, Clara. That means more to me than you know. My goal was to create a place where people could feel a connection, a warmth that goes beyond just a meal." Clara reached for Marjorie's hand, her gaze sincere. "Well, you've succeeded. Fusion Heart is more than just a restaurant. It's a place where people feel welcome, where we can escape the world for a little while and feel at home." As Marjorie thanked her, she felt a surge of gratitude for her guests, her team, and the community that had embraced Fusion Heart. She had wanted her restaurant to be a space of unity, and hearing Clara's words reassured her that she was on the right path. But as the lunch rush wound down and the kitchen began to quiet, a new challenge emerged. One of her cooks, a young man named Javier, approached her with a worried look on his face. He held up a tray of vegetables he had just finished prepping. "Chef, I hate to say this, but we're almost out of fresh produce. We didn't get our delivery this morning," Javier said, his voice tense. Marjorie's stomach twisted with worry. She had counted on that delivery to get through the day's reservations, and now she had to figure out how to make do with what they had. "All right, we'll make it work," she said, forcing a calm tone. "Let's get creative with what we've got left in the pantry. I'll go to the farmer's market on my break and pick up some extra ingredients." Javier nodded, visibly relieved, and Marjorie set her mind to adapting the day's menu to what was available. This was a small hiccup, she reminded herself. She had faced much greater obstacles, and she wasn't about to let one missed delivery derail her. After rushing to the market and back, Marjorie returned to Fusion Heart, her arms loaded with fresh vegetables and herbs. She barely had time to set down her haul before the evening shift began, and soon the restaurant was packed again. Her team moved with practiced efficiency, and as the dinner service unfolded, she felt a sense of pride in how far they had come together. But just as she thought the night was going smoothly, a voice called from the dining area, echoing into the kitchen. It was Sam, his voice tense. "Chef, there's someone here to see you," he said, his expression unreadable as he poked his head into the kitchen. Marjorie wiped her hands on her apron and followed Sam out, wondering who could possibly need to see her at this hour. When she reached the dining room, she froze. Standing by the entrance was Lucilia. Marjorie's heart skipped a beat, but she steeled herself, squaring her shoulders and approaching her former boss with a calm smile. "Lucilia," she greeted, her voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lucilia shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting around the bustling restaurant before settling on Marjorie. "I heard about Fusion Heart," she began, her voice softer than Marjorie had ever heard it. "I've been meaning to come by, see what you've created." Marjorie raised an eyebrow, surprised by Lucilia's tone. "Well, I hope you enjoy it," she replied politely. Lucilia hesitated, seeming almost unsure of herself. "It's remarkable what you've built here, Marjorie. I can see why people speak so highly of it. The atmosphere, the food, the connection you have with your guests. It's something special." Marjorie nodded, her expression remaining neutral. "Thank you, Lucilia. That's what I've always wanted. A place that feels like home, where people can share a meal and feel like they belong." Lucilia's gaze softened, and for the first time, Marjorie saw something in her former boss's eyes that looked like remorse. "I underestimated you," Lucilia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I let my own pride and insecurities cloud my judgment, and I took it out on you. I see now that I was wrong, and I'm sorry for that." Marjorie felt a rush of emotions, memories of the past bubbling up. She had longed for this acknowledgement, this apology. But standing here, she realized that she didn't need it anymore. She had moved on, forged her own path, and built something beautiful out of the pain of that experience. "I appreciate your words, Lucilia," Marjorie replied, her voice calm. "But the truth is, I'm grateful for what happened. It pushed me to find my own strength and create something that reflects who I am. So, in a way, I have you to thank for that." Lucilia's expression flickered, a hint of surprise crossing her face. "You're a better person than I ever was, Marjorie, and I'm glad to see you found success." Marjorie offered a small smile, a gesture of peace and forgiveness. "Thank you, Lucilia. I wish you well." With a final nod, Lucilia turned and made her way toward the door, leaving Marjorie with a profound sense of closure. The past, once a source of pain, had finally been laid to rest. As the evening wound down, Marjorie gathered her team for a quick meeting. She thanked them for their hard work, sharing her vision for the future, and reminding them of the values that had built Fusion Heart. Each member of her team was a part of her journey now, a reflection of her belief in the power of unity and resilience. After closing up, Marjorie found herself standing alone in the quiet of Fusion Heart, the hum of the day fading into a peaceful silence. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, of the people who had supported her, and of the lessons she had learned along the way. She looked around the restaurant, the space she had poured her heart into, and felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. Fusion Heart was more than just a restaurant. It was her home, her dream, her story. And as she locked the doors and walked out into the cool night air, Marjorie knew that her journey was far from over. She had built something beautiful, but she was ready to keep growing, to keep learning, and to keep sharing her love for food and community. With her heart full of hope and her spirit renewed, Marjorie walked down the quiet street, the future stretching out before her like an open road, a legacy of heart. As the months passed, Fusion Heart became more than just a popular restaurant. It became a fixture in the community. Marjorie's unique dishes, infused with her heritage and heart, resonated with people from all walks of life. Word of mouth spread, and soon, diners from neighboring cities traveled to experience the warm, vibrant atmosphere and bold flavors that defined her restaurant. But Fusion Heart was more than just a culinary destination. It was a place where people connected, where stories were shared, and where a sense of belonging thrived. Marjorie had created a haven that welcomed everyone, from families celebrating milestones to strangers looking for comfort in a shared meal. With each passing day, Marjorie could feel her vision growing, reaching beyond what she had originally imagined. One afternoon, Marjorie received a call from a local nonprofit organization dedicated to youth empowerment. They wanted to discuss a potential partnership, and Marjorie was eager to meet with them. The organization, called Brighter Horizons, worked with young people from underprivileged backgrounds, teaching them life skills and offering them a pathway to brighter futures. The director, a woman named Tonya, visited Fusion Heart to discuss the possibility of Marjorie offering culinary workshops and mentorship to their youth participants. "We believe your story and your work here at Fusion Heart could really inspire these young people," Tonya said over a cup of Marjorie's special house blend coffee. "They need role models who show them that resilience and passion can lead to success, and I can't think of anyone better than you." Marjorie's heart warmed at the opportunity. "I'd be honored, Tonya," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I know how it feels to struggle and to feel like your dreams are out of reach. If I can help even one of these kids see their own potential, it would mean everything to me." They began planning the program together, crafting a series of workshops that would teach cooking basics, kitchen etiquette, and the fundamentals of running a business. Marjorie wanted to share more than just culinary skills. She wanted to impart the resilience and courage it took to pursue one's dreams, no matter the obstacles. On the first day of the workshop, Marjorie's kitchen buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. A group of young participants, ranging in age from 15 to 19, gathered around as she introduced herself, sharing her journey from a waitress to a chef and business owner. She told them about the struggles she had faced, the doubts that had plagued her, and the pivotal moments that had transformed her life. One young girl, Jada, listened with rapt attention. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and Marjorie could sense a kindred spirit in her. After the workshop, Jada approached Marjorie, clutching her notebook tightly. "Chef Marjorie, can I ask you something?" Jada's voice was soft, but filled with determination. "Of course, Jada," Marjorie replied, smiling warmly. "How did you keep going when things were hard?" Jada asked, her gaze intense. "I mean, when people didn't believe in you." Marjorie paused, considering her answer. "There were times when I didn't believe in myself, Jada," she said honestly. "But I kept reminding myself why I started. I thought of the people I wanted to serve, the stories I wanted to tell through my food, and the dreams I had for myself. When you focus on what truly matters to you, it becomes easier to silence the doubts and the people who don't see your potential. You have to believe in yourself first and keep moving forward." no matter what. Jada nodded, her expression thoughtful. Thank you, Chef Marjorie. I think I understand. As the weeks passed, Marjorie's bond with the young participants grew. She watched as they learned to handle knives with confidence, transform simple ingredients into beautiful dishes, and work together as a team. Marjorie could see the pride in their eyes as they presented their creations, each one an expression of their hard work and growing self-assurance. Through her work with Brighter Horizons, Marjorie found a new sense of purpose. She realized that her restaurant wasn't just a reflection of her journey. It was a platform to uplift others, to give back to the community that had embraced her. Watching these young people find their footing, she saw herself in them. The girl who had once doubted her own worth, the young woman who had felt lost but had found her way through resilience and passion. One evening, as Marjorie closed up the restaurant after a particularly busy night, she found herself reflecting on everything that had led her to this point. The kitchen was quiet, the lingering aroma of spices and herbs filling the air. She walked through the empty dining area, memories of the journey flooding her mind. In her office, she noticed an envelope on her desk. It was from Tanya, the director of Brighter Horizons. Marjorie opened it, finding a handwritten note from Jada tucked inside. Dear Chef Marjorie, thank you for everything you've taught me. You've shown me that dreams can come true, even when things seem impossible. I used to think my circumstances defined me, but now I see that I can define my own path. I'm inspired by the way you believed in yourself and created something beautiful out of hardship. I hope to do the same one day. With all my gratitude, Jada. As Marjorie read the note, tears pricked her eyes. She had always believed in the power of food to bring people together, to share stories and memories, but this moment touched her soul in a way she hadn't anticipated. Her journey, once filled with doubt and struggle, had now come full circle. Fusion Heart was not only a place for meals, but a place for inspiration, growth, and transformation. But Marjorie's impact didn't end there. Over time, she began to expand Fusion Heart's mission. She hosted community events, inviting local farmers and artisans to showcase their products, celebrating the diversity and richness of the community she had come to love. She began hiring staff from the Brighter Horizons program, offering young people their first jobs in a supportive environment, teaching them the values of hard work, creativity, and resilience. One day, Marjorie received a call from a prestigious food magazine. They wanted to feature Fusion Heart and Marjorie's story in their upcoming issue on groundbreaking chefs who were redefining the culinary landscape. We've been hearing amazing things about Fusion Heart, the editor told her. Your work, your unique approach to food, and your commitment to the community are exactly the kind of story we want to tell. Marjorie agreed, and soon after, a journalist and photographer visited Fusion Heart, capturing the vibrant atmosphere, the colorful dishes, and the love that infused every corner of the restaurant. When the article was published, Fusion Heart gained national recognition, drawing diners from across the country who were eager to experience the warmth and authenticity that had become Marjorie's signature. As the years passed, Marjorie continued to grow both personally and professionally. She expanded Fusion Heart, opening a second location and even considering a cookbook that would share her fusion recipes and the stories behind each dish. She never lost sight of the values that had brought her this far: humility, resilience, and the belief that everyone deserved a place at the table. One summer afternoon, Marjorie was hosting a special event at Fusion Heart for Brighter Horizons, celebrating the graduation of their latest class. She stood on the small stage, looking out at the faces of young people, their families, and community members who had supported her journey. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice filled with emotion. When I started Fusion Heart, I wanted to create a place where people could feel at home, where food would bring us together, bridging cultures and backgrounds. But this place became something more than I ever dreamed. It became a space for growth, for second chances, and for believing in ourselves. The crowd erupted in applause, and Marjorie felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had achieved her dream, But more importantly, she had created a legacy of heart, a legacy that would live on in the lives of those she had touched. After the event, as Marjorie walked through the quiet kitchen, she paused by the counter where she had spent countless hours crafting dishes, solving problems, and building her vision. She placed her hand on the cool stainless steel, a quiet smile playing on her lips. Her journey had taken her from a humble waitress to a celebrated chef and community leader. She had faced hardship, disappointment, and doubt, but she had transformed each obstacle into fuel for her dreams. Fusion Heart was more than just a restaurant. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of connection, and to the enduring belief that we can all create something beautiful out of the challenges we face. As Marjorie walked out of Fusion Heart that evening, she looked up at the stars shining brightly overhead, feeling at peace. Her heart was full, and her journey, though far from over, had already made a difference. And with every step she took, she knew she was carrying forward a legacy of love, unity, and strength, a legacy that would live on for generations to come. The next chapter. Years had passed since Fusion Heart first opened its doors, yet its mission and warmth continued to touch lives. Marjorie had long since solidified her place in the culinary world, with her name synonymous with innovative cuisine and a deeply community-focused approach. She had opened a second Fusion Heart location in a nearby city, and her staff had grown into a close-knit family, each member carrying forward her values and vision. But as Fusion Heart blossomed, Marjorie found herself wondering about the future, feeling a restlessness that pulled her in new directions. One morning, Marjorie sat in her office, gazing out the window at the busy street below. She loved her restaurant and everything it represented, but something deep within her stirred with a desire to do more, to reach beyond the confines of Fusion Heart. She had created a successful restaurant, fostered a community, and changed lives. But now, she wondered, what could come next? As she sipped her coffee, an idea began to take shape. Marjorie remembered the young people she had mentored through Brighter Horizons, the spark of hope she'd seen in their eyes as they learned new skills and discovered their potential. She thought about how much joy and purpose she had found in mentoring and teaching, and a new vision started to form. Over the following weeks, Marjorie began working on a new project, one that combined her love for food with her commitment to empowering the next generation. She envisioned a culinary school, a place where young people from all backgrounds could learn not only the art of cooking, but also the skills needed to build successful careers and lives. She wanted to create an environment where creativity, collaboration, and resilience were nurtured, where students could explore their potential without fear of failure. When Marjorie announced her plans, the response was overwhelming. Friends, former students, and community members rallied around her, eager to support her latest endeavor. She named the school Roots and Wings Culinary Institute, a nod to the idea that strong roots would ground the students in their heritage and skills, while the wings would represent their potential to soar into whatever futures they could dream. Finding the right location for Roots and Wings took time. But eventually, Marjorie found the perfect spot in an old industrial building with wide-open spaces, high ceilings, and room for the extensive kitchens, classrooms, and community spaces she envisioned. As the renovations began, Marjorie dedicated herself to designing a curriculum that went beyond traditional culinary training. She collaborated with local educators, counselors, and business leaders to create a comprehensive program that taught life skills, entrepreneurship, and the art of resilience alongside cooking techniques. Roots and Wings attracted young people from all over the region, many of whom came from challenging backgrounds and faced barriers to traditional education. Marjorie watched as students who had once struggled to find direction transformed, their confidence growing with each lesson. They learned to solder, braise, and bake, but they also learned about financial literacy, managing a kitchen, and collaborating as a team. Each week brought new triumphs, small victories that reflected the powerful journey each student was undertaking. As Roots and Wings grew, Marjorie found herself taking a step back from Fusion Heart, trusting her well-trained team to run the restaurant with the same passion and care she had always instilled in them. Sam, Her sous chef, who had been with her since the beginning, stepped into the role of head chef, bringing his own creativity to the menu while preserving Marjorie's vision. With Sam at the helm, Marjorie was able to fully immerse herself in the work of the culinary school, mentoring students and building a team of dedicated instructors. One evening, after a long day of classes, Marjorie sat with a group of students in the school's cozy common area. The students were huddled around a table, excitedly discussing their latest recipes and future aspirations. Jada, now a teaching assistant at Roots and Wings, caught Marjorie's eye and smiled. "Chef Marjorie," Jada began, her voice warm with admiration, "you have no idea how much this place has changed my life. You gave me a chance when no one else did, and now I get to be a part of helping others find their paths. It's incredible." Marjorie reached over, giving Jada's hand a gentle squeeze. "It's not just me, Jada. You're the one who showed up, put in the hard work, and found your strength. I'm just grateful I could be part of your journey." Jada's eyes sparkled. "You know, someday I hope to open my own restaurant. I want to create a place where people feel as welcomed and inspired as I did here, and at Fusion Heart. I want to carry forward what you've taught us." Marjorie felt a swell of pride and joy. This was her legacy, not just a restaurant, but a ripple effect of hope, resilience, and ambition. As the students around her shared their dreams, Marjorie felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. She had built a foundation that would allow others to build their own futures, to create spaces where food and community could unite people and uplift spirits. Over time, Roots and Wings gained a reputation not only for its unique approach to culinary training, but also for the success of its graduates. Many of Marjorie's former students went on to work in renowned kitchens, some opened their own establishments, and others returned to Roots and Wings to mentor the next generation of aspiring chefs. The Institute became a symbol of resilience, a place where young people could find not just a career but a calling. Years later, Marjorie received an invitation to attend an event at the governor's mansion. She was to be honored for her contributions to the culinary arts and the community. Marjorie accepted with humility, not fully grasping the impact she had made until she arrived and saw the number of people gathered in her honor. During the ceremony, the governor gave a speech that highlighted Marjorie's journey, her dedication to uplifting others, and the profound influence of her work. But what touched Marjorie most was when Jada, now an accomplished chef in her own right, took the stage to share a few words. Chef Marjorie taught us that resilience is the most important ingredient in any recipe for success. Jada began, her voice filled with emotion. She believed in each of us when no one else did, and she showed us that our pasts don't define our futures. Thanks to her, I discovered not just my love for cooking, but my belief in myself. Chef Marjorie, you changed my life, and the lives of so many others. We're your legacy, and we're all incredibly proud to carry it forward. Tears filled Marjorie's eyes as she listened, the weight of her journey settling in her heart. She had come so far from that young woman who had once doubted her worth, who had once been dismissed and underestimated. Her legacy was now woven into the lives of each person she had touched, and she realized that her story would continue through them. That night, as she drove home from the ceremony, Marjorie felt a sense of peace she had never known. Her journey had been one of struggle, triumph, and transformation. She had built not just a restaurant or a school, but a foundation for a future she could only have dreamed of. Fusion Heart and Roots and Wings thrived, each carrying forward her vision of unity, resilience, and love for community. Marjorie knew that as long as people gathered to share meals, to learn, and to grow, her legacy would live on. A legacy rooted in heart, in the belief that everyone deserved a chance to discover their potential and follow their dreams. And as she lay in bed that night, Marjorie felt a deep gratitude for every twist and turn of her journey. She had discovered her purpose, fulfilled her dreams, and found peace in the knowledge that her story would continue long after she was gone, carried forward in the lives she had touched and the hearts she had inspired.